It's by truckers for truckers. This is the Channel 19 experience. Let's hit the road.
Hey everybody, it's Tony from the Channel 19 experience. Just making a little video here. We can walk through the per load profit calculator. I'll share my screen here in a second. Funny coincidence this week. So I got an email this afternoon and it was from Overdrive Magazine, their weekly newsletter, whatever the case is. And the top article in there was basically a profit calculator from Overdrive Magazine that they'd been working on with Gary Bucks. So what are the odds? Great minds think alike. Imitation is the highest form of flattery. Pick your catchphrase. But we'll take a look at our profit calculator. Then this week I'll go take a look at theirs. We'll compare notes, see if the methodologies match up, and may any profit calculator that people like to use win, because when people know their profits, they're a lot more likely to be successful. And that's what I know Gary cares most about. I know the folks at Overdrive Magazine care about, and so do we. So let me jump in and share my screen here and let's get started. Now I'm doing this totally off the cuff. I didn't even really think about what I was going to say. We're just going to roll with it. So share screen number 1. And share. All right, should be working. Let me move this thing out of the way here. All right, so when you pop in, and these tabs are just these extra ones are just stuff I was playing around with. They won't be on the copy I give to you. You'll just get sheet 1. So what you'll see is, and I've already got some data filled in on this one, so you get an idea of what the calculator is going to spit out here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and we'll just work on this from one side to the other. All right, so we can go in here. I'm going to go in and pull out a bunch of this data and just delete it. See, now I've got all my costs in there. And of course, if we haul freight that is pays 0, we will make exactly 0 profit. I'll just take these out too. Take this out too. All right, we'll leave those in there for now. All right, so you open it up, you're going to get a bunch of errors. Of course, it can't calculate when the rate is 0. So we're just going to put in some numbers, and let's just say that we're going to haul load for $2,000. Line haul, $200. Fuel surcharge, $100 accessorial. Maybe that's a tarping charge, multiple stop fees, whatever the case might be, any flat amount. So we got $2,300 gross revenue on the load. And the next box here is assuming that it's at 100%. So it's assuming that you're getting 100% of the 2,300. You're not giving up a cut to somebody. Let's say you're leased onto somebody, and let's say you're pulling their trailer and you're giving up 20%, so you're getting 80%. Well, you just put 80% in here, and that'll back what your gross pay is down here. If you're only giving up, let's say 5% to some dispatching company that helps you find loads or whatever the case might be, you go ahead and put 95% in here, and that's what your cut will be after that. So there's obviously a few different things that you might want to choose to lump into this, depending on if you're factoring the load or however else some money's coming off the top. But all the calculations as far as revenue for the load are coming off what's your cut, not off the gross cut, but what your cut is. Like I said, if they're the same thing, you're getting 100% of the load, then just put 100% in a box and the numbers should be the same. All right, so then you've got your deadhead miles. We'll call it 50 deadhead miles on a 700 paid miles. So we've got 750 total miles going in here. So $2,300, 750 miles. And if we go over here, we'll see that that pays out roughly $3.29 a mile on loaded, $3.07 on all miles. Then next up, enter in what your miles per gallon are, what kind of fuel efficiency you're getting. So let's just call it 7 miles per gallon. For the sake of argument, let me slide over a little decimal there. All right, and then you've got your what your expected cost per gallon is on fuel. Now, I talked a little bit about it in the podcast on the expected miles per gallon. You know, be willing to adjust that. If like this is a light load and you're heading across, the middle of the country, no mountain ranges, you might expect to get maybe 7.2, 7.3, 7.5, depending on how light it is or what you're hauling, right? If you've got a small crate on a back of a flatbed, you're going to get pretty decent fuel mileage. A reefer is going to pull the same way from a aerodynamic standpoint, but your weight definitely changes your miles per gallon. And also things like headwind, tailwind, winter driving conditions, you get a little bit worse MPG in the wintertime than you do in the summertime. So just things to keep in mind. You can adjust this and give yourself an idea. If you're going to run fast, going to run 75, 80 miles an hour across Montana and North Dakota, you probably get less fuel mileage. If you got 3 days to go 700 miles, you might go 62 miles an hour and get the most fuel economy you can out of the load. Just estimate how you plan to run it and what the conditions are, and that'll give you your MPG. Then, of course, you got your fuel per gallon or your price per gallon. Go ahead and put something in there. Let's call it 350. But this is where you look at your fuel map, your app for your fuel card, see where the best prices are. Where do you want to buy your fuel? This is just based on you telling the spreadsheet where you're going to buy your fuel. We've got other expenses down here below, tolls and bridges. Let's say it's $50. Scale expenses, maybe $12, unless you're hauling produce or something. You got to go back and forth, wait a couple times. Permits or additional licenses, let's call that $50. So you've got basically another $112 here in accessorial charges. And then we got driver pay. So this is basically your variable cost. This is the stuff that changes depending on how the conditions of the load. It depends, right? They're not fixed. You're not always going to pay toll and bridge expense. You're not always going to pay for scales. You may not always have additional licenses or permits. It just depends on the load, and that's why they're a variable expense. Same with your fuel cost. The more miles you run, the more fuel you're going to spend. You're going to have to buy. All right. Over here on the right-hand side is where you have your fixed expenses, right? These are the ones that you're going to have to pay no matter what, whether you move the truck 50 feet or 500 miles, right? You're going to have a truck payment, you're going to have a trailer payment, you're going to have insurance, license, tires. Okay, you could probably debate that one, but even if it's parked, you're going to get dry rot and things like that. So this is basically a rolling cost per mile for tires. And then, of course, repairs and maintenance per mile. So you can put your own numbers in here. Like I mentioned in the podcast, OOIDA has a calculator. You can go in there. Plus, we're going to go see what they got over at Overdrive Magazine to calculate some of this stuff. So anyway, I put the industry averages in here. These averages come from ATRI, and so they might not be exactly what yours are. Go use the OOIDA calculator, and it will give you an idea of what your averages are, your cost per mile in these major categories. There can be significant fluctuations. Insurance cost isn't going to be the same for everybody. License cost isn't going to be the same depending on which state you're base plating out of. You got your truck payment, of course, ranges anywhere from, $250,000 financed out there for, how $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month, all the way down to guys who got their trucks paid for and their cost is zero essentially on the truck payment or the trailer payment side. So quite a bit of variation. Nice thing is, once you set these up, unless something significant changes, you can just leave these alone. They pretty much just stay here the whole time, and you can come in and easily clear up the spreadsheet and start over without having to touch any of these boxes unless you do something like buy a different piece of equipment or your insurance renewal comes back with a significant rate difference, things like that. And then you're just tweaking small adjustments as you go. So it multiplies basically however many miles you're going to run by your cost per mile, tells you your total cost on this load for those things. So you get that total fixed expense cost. And then down here, we've got a couple other options for driver pay. You can, and I'll clear these out for a second so we can see what's going on here. You can pay a flat driver pay. So let's say we're going to pay this driver whatever 50 cents a mile and 750 miles to 375 bucks, right? I'm going to pay him that. Let me put a little dollar sign on here while we're at it. Or if you don't want to pay that way, right, we can pay him a percentage. Let's say we're going to pay him 25%. That pays him 575. That's a better deal for the driver than the 50 cents a mile was. Or you can pay mileage pay and go 50 cents a mile here, which should tell us 375 like we had before, which it did. The math checks out. You can also do a combination of these, right? You could do 50 cents a mile plus I'm going to do a $50 flat fee. So that gives us 4.25. So if you want to figure out for a driver, figure out for yourself if you want to pay yourself a wage or you're paying yourself a wage. If you're running an LLC or an S corp, if you're a single truck operator, probably should be running an S corp, paying yourself a payroll. That way you can take advantage of the various tax benefits of that structure. But I'm just going to leave this here the way it is right now, that we're paying 50 cents a mile and a 50-buck kicker. So on the driver benefits, these are also estimates. If you're paying yourself your payroll or you're paying a driver payroll, you should be able to get these percentages right from your payroll company. If you're using somebody like Mike Ritzema over at Superior Trucking Payroll Services, he'll be able to tell you what your percentages are here for basically everything but health insurance and then health insurance. I mean, really, I could have just made this one box, honestly. Would have been probably just as simple, but these are rough estimates of what this costs on for trucking, right? Based on work comp and the various rates. Of course, it's different state to state. Each driver may be a little bit different depending on you're doing payroll and where they're based out of and where you're based out of. But it just gives you a rough estimate of what it would cost for all the matchings and the benefits. So then that gives you a total cost down here of what your all-in driver wages and benefit expense would be. So then if we go back up to the top, we're going to see a grand total here of here's our revenue. We discussed that earlier. Now all of our expense boxes are filled in. Our fuel cost, our tolls and bridges, our scales, permits, driver gross wages, the benefit cost. Per diem, I haven't calculated in here yet, but I'll work with Mike Ritzema and we'll get that figured out. It's not rocket science when it comes to the math. I just got to do the work and make sure somebody smarter than me actually checks the math. Then we've got our truck payment cost. These are all our fixed expense costs that come right out of this box over here that I showed you before. So 240, 8250, 6750, all that stuff lines up right here. And so that gives us an all-in total of our total expenses on this load. Then we can come back and look at the top. So we've still got our gross per mile, all on loaded miles, our gross on all miles, which of course is lower because we've got the 50 miles deadhead in there. Then we've got our gross revenue, $2,300, which comes from right here, actually right here. And then we've got total expenses, which comes from right down here, 1650.50. And then we've got a gross profit on that load after we pay everything you see here, $684.50. So that tells us what our gross profit margin per loaded mile is, 98 cents. Our gross profit margin on all miles, 91 cents. And that's including paying the driver the whole 9 yards. And that's pretty much about it. And while I'm in here, this is the calculator I was talking about on the podcast. So you can put in origin, destination, you can put in any waypoints along the way, hit run the mileage tool, and it's going to spit out your state mileages. It's going to give you your total mileage, and then it'll help calculate your cost estimates and your fuel tax estimates for how many gallons you're supposed to buy in each particular state along that journey in order to pay for your fuel tax. So if you buy all your fuel in one state, you still owe the fuel tax to the states that you didn't buy fuel in. Now, if you overbought in one state, then they owe you a refund. And so that's how the whole magic of figuring out your fuel tax in that game gets played. You want to make sure that you're buying the most efficient fuel overall, not just buying the cheapest on the marquee. It may not be the net cheapest fuel price when you subtract the tax out of it. So that's how the calculator works. But we'll work on that later. Talk about that more next time. Anyway, my next step is to go have a look at Overdrive Magazine's calculator and see if they took any different approaches than I did. Be interesting to see. So, like I said on the podcast, if you want a copy of the spreadsheet, email me, inbox at channel19experience.com. We'll make you a copy just for you. Send it over. You're the only one who will be in there. And then you can play around. And like I also said, if you have any questions, reach out. Happy to help. If you've never touched a spreadsheet before, don't be afraid. Neither did I at one point. Neither did all the rest of us. So just ask. That's the biggest thing. People are willing to help you. People are willing to share their knowledge. That's what's great about a lot of folks in this business. We're here to help. And you know what? One day I'll be asking for your help about something I have no idea about, like CB radios or mechanics, because I suck at both those things. But I do know spreadsheets and I do know math. All right. That's all from me. Have a great night. We've got work to do.